Okay, so what I've set up here is a mock-up of a steering setup with a small servo, a steering arm position feedback, and a little setup here. As you can see, the steering is quite stiff to turn because the servo is preventing the steering from moving. Now, when I power it all up, because the relay set is set to not energize when there's no transmitter available, it keeps everything safe and non-moving. So I'll turn the transmitter on. As you can see, the little speedo is now settled because it's got a signal from the radio control receiver. So here we've got forwards and backwards from the remote control, and the steering is quite happy operating from there. Now, when it's in handset control, the throttle doesn't do anything, and the steering will resist movement. If I flick it to the car control, you see this little light comes on to indicate that the relays have flipped over. So you no longer have throttle control from there or steering. The steering now drives the servo. The throttle pedal now controls the speed. Now, if it's and you flick the switch, it obviously goes back to handset control, and then you can flick it backwards and forwards as much as you like. The advantage of this is you're now using the servo as an assistance rather than something that drags against the steering, so it ends up being a bit like power steering. What you do need is a small amount of clearance between the steering mechanism and the actuator on the wheels, although you can kind of force it if there's not much play, but that will need a bit of fine-tuning and adjustment depending on the setup. So that's the system as it works. Okay, so here's a slightly closer look at the steering setup. So here you have a lever running off the steering shaft, which then links across to the position feedback of the steering. So this is a servo tester hooked up into a little 3D printed block that allows you to mount it through two directions. So you've got bolt holes that go through that way for vertical mounting, or two holes going the other way for horizontal mounting. So that should make it fairly easy to mount in the car. This little circuit board here allows you to adjust the range of the servo and the stroke of the servo, so it balances the output from the position feedback to the stroke of the servo. It also allows you to reverse the direction, so depending on which way you mount the little block, you might need to flip the direction of the servo. So this little pot here, the second one that's kind of more central to the board, when it's in the middle, it kind of doesn't increase the stroke at all, and then as you go either side, it will increase the stroke negatively or increase the stroke positively to give you different directions. So as you can see, you've got the little servo here, with the output from the steering shaft and the input to the position feedback. As you can see, when you move it slowly, that central rod doesn't really touch the steering mechanism at all. It's purely driving the servo almost like a drive-by-wire setup. Now you can kind of force it to a certain extent, but the servo will follow and pull the steering across. Now, depending on what kind of servo you've got and the torque and all the rest of it, then obviously that will require a little bit of setup to get it all operating nicely.